Hi, and welcome back to This Week in Voice for Thursday, September the 21st, 2017. This Week in Voice is brought to you by Voice XP, blazing the trail in voice technology. Voice XP is taking the lead in developing Alexa skills for some of the best brands in the world. With Voice XP, all you have to do is say it to revolutionize your marketing strategy. And if you have not gone to www.voicexp.com, stop the podcast just for a minute, go there, check it out. You'll be glad that you did. I'm Bradley Metrock. I'm CEO of a company called Score Publishing based here in Nashville, Tennessee. We are very pleased to have a phenomenal panel today. Our first guest is Professor Emily Bender. Emily, say hello.
Hello. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Emily Bender is a professor of linguistics at the University of Washington, along with faculty director of the professional MS program in computational linguistics. Emily, share with us just what is the study of linguistics?
So the study of linguistics is sometimes described as the science of human language. We're interested in how languages work, how they change over time, how they're similar to each other and different from each other, how people process language when they're talking, when they're understanding, how children learn their first language, how older people learn second languages. And computational linguistics has to do with how we can get computers to naturally deal with human language.
That's really cool. Thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Our next guest is Jess Thornhill. Jess, say hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us once again. Jess, when we spoke last time, you had just switched on to LifeBot. I think LifeBot had just gone live. Share with us a little bit what you're working on right now and a little bit about LifeBot.
Yeah, so LifeBot is a voice app, so it's available on Amazon Alexa and now recently, or very soon, hopefully, on Google Home. And the idea is that we want to create a voice app that will be the only app you ever need, and also help them do simple tasks and use Alexa and a voice assistant in the best way possible. So we're starting with productivity to help you do things like setting reminders and to-do lists. But the idea is that we want to become a platform that can complete almost anything.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jess. We appreciate you sharing your time and insight with us today. And our third guest is Karen Kaushansky. Karen, say hello.
Hi from Switzerland.
Karen, first of all, you can't say that and we can't explore that. So why are you in Switzerland?
Just moved out here with my family for a big adventure, but I am continuing to work in the field that I've been working in, which is working with emerging technologies, pushing the boundaries on things like voice and conversational interactions and self-driving cars.
Very cool. And I did not know until doing research for this episode that you had been named one of Business Insider's top 75 designers in technology. Congratulations on that.
Thanks. That was a few years ago. I feel like they need to put up out an updated list, and let's see, if I can kind of keep on it. But that was a few years ago already.
Yeah, no, still very cool. Thank all three of you for joining us today. Thrilled to have you. With that, let's get into the news. Story number one is a very interesting one, and what has become normal for this show, it involves Amazon. Amazon is developing Alexa-powered glasses, and if that weren't enough of a story, there's more. They're going to be ready by the end of the year. This is really going to shape a lot of how voice-first technology evolves moving forward. And Karen, I will start with you on this story. What do you think about Amazon trying again with glasses? Google Glass, they tried, didn't work. What do you think about Amazon trying again? And what did you take away from this story in general?
So when I first read the headline, I got very excited. I'm currently working with a client working in mixed reality and have been recognizing the power of voice in mixed reality, in virtual reality, kind of as you're augmenting the world around you and what you might want to do with voice. But then I dug into it a little more and found Amazon is creating this. They won't have a camera, supposedly. No camera, no screen. Basically, I think they're just trying to introduce Alexa in a way that you can take her with you on the go because they're not built directly into the smartphone, which we all know. But what I have to ask is, what does Alexa know or give me on the go that other assistants don't? And is it worth wearing glasses for? I use Alexa to play music. I love my Alexa. I reorder toilet paper, but I don't know that I need to wear something extra in order to do that on the street. I got excited, but then I was a little disappointed because I'm not sure what the real use case is if it's not kind of pushing boundaries in other areas.
So I think I had the same question, which is, it's interesting to think about where it might go, but if the point is all audio, then why glasses? Like, I already wear glasses with corrective lenses. I don't want to switch them out for something that's audio. I think Amazon might do better to do something that's, I guess they want access to the sort of the skull behind the ear to be able to have it be really quiet. So you could do some sort of cool ear decoration or something and leave the glasses out of it.
I think potentially if Amazon have some kind of longer strategy behind this, it could be quite a clever move, because I think obviously this is probably their attempt to compete with Google and Apple in the fact that they don't have hardware. So their voice, as in mobile hardware that's on the go. So obviously you can access Google Assistant and Siri on your phones, but Amazon have been behind the others because you can't do that right now. So I guess this is and obviously the Amazon phones didn't do that well. But with something like this, it lets you access Alexa on the go. But I agree that you only being able to have audio it doesn't really make sense for glasses, but it could just be a way of Amazon getting out a glasses product first, which obviously they seem to care about being first in the market with the Echo devices. So maybe this is just their way of getting something out there early with the potential of having future versions that will allow for things like cameras and augmented reality, because there are rumors that Apple are working on AR glasses, and obviously you've got Google Glass. So maybe this is just their first iteration of it, and we'll see something more exciting in the future.
Bradley, just thinking about a conversation you guys had a few weeks ago with the Microsoft Cortana and Amazon deal. The other thing that came to mind is are we going to now see people walking down the street with Amazon glasses saying hey, Cortana, right? All of a sudden, the lines are blurring a lot. I just don't know, what the glasses will do for the whole experience.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I just got back from the Intelligent Assistance Conference out in San Francisco. Great conference, great organizers. Opus Research really did a nice job. Met a lot of folks out in the Bay Area. But I will say this, at the table that we were set up at in the vendors area, up walked some guy, I'm not going to say who it was, and explaining to him, we do a bunch of shows on Voice First FM, including This Week in Voice. We're going to be recording that later this week. And a lot of the stuff that is going on with Alexa is moving at a fast pace. And he stopped me and said, yeah, Google's really doing a lot of great things with that, aren't they? And I say that only to say, it's not to call anybody out, but just everything's moving at such a fast pace that this guy was a professional in this industry. And even he is confused between Alexa and Google Home. And you can just imagine the layperson is really starting to get buried under all of these product developments. And to all of y'all's point, I think it's incumbent on Amazon to educate the market on how they would supposed to be using these glasses. But speaking for strictly myself, if they do come out with one that is more than audio, that has an Echo Show sort of screen built in some sort of augmented reality type of way, man, I am on board for that.
That's why I got excited. I think that there is room for things like that, and maybe that'll come, but clearly not. Maybe not in the first rev.
So we will move on to story number 2, which is our second VoiceBot AI story of the week. This week, it is the story that is based in some data that Voice Labs has sourced, indicating voice app retention has doubled in the last 9 months. And Emily, with this, I want to start with you. What did you take away from the story? And do you think, sort of the overall theme, I think, of the story is that usage patterns of smart speakers and voice technology are shifting and evolving. Where do you think we're headed with all of this?
So I clearly we're at the beginning of the curve here. I mean, doubling is going from 3% to 6%. There's a lot of room for that to go higher. But I think that the main obstacle between for many of these apps is ease of use, and that ease of use in particular has to do with, can the conversation be natural, and can the conversation continue for more than one turn? And that's, I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of the benefits of voice-based interfaces, but oftentimes you sort of can do one thing at a time, and then you have to say the wake word again, or there's no saving the state of the conversation, what linguists would call the common ground, or very rudimentary common ground. And especially with all of these skills that are being contributed through that platform that Amazon's making available, I think we're going to see, even as some groups figure out how to do multi-turn conversations, a majority are not going to. And so it's going to be confusing for users for a while. But is this something I can keep talking to, or is it really just one-off commands?
But you do see it as a positive, right? That this number has gone up?
Sure. I mean, it seems like to a certain extent, developers are figuring out how to create something that's engaging enough and useful enough that people find it worthwhile to use.
Yeah, for us as builders of voice apps, it's obviously great news to see that more people are keeping on and using them in the second week. And yeah, I think it definitely shows two things. So one, as Emily said, it means that hopefully this is showing that developers are creating better conversations, that they're creating skills that are easier to use, that people know how to use and are more likely to use longer term. But also, I guess it does show the general trend that people are starting to get more comfortable with voice, and they're understanding that this can be a part of their life and something that they use every day. But I would definitely say that the fact that it's doubled is obviously a good thing. There's definitely a long way to go. We did a survey with some of our users a couple of weeks ago and asked how many third-party skills they used on a regular basis. And a lot of them still don't know the difference between native Alexa and a third-party skill. So I think there's a massive amount of education needs to happen on what a skill is and how to use it and how it's actually even different to what Alexa can do natively.
6% still pretty low, and I think we'll talk about this with another story on quality versus the quantity of skills. A lot of it is about discoverability and education. I'm curious, what I'd love to see is the types of voice apps that are being used, to understand how are people really using this. I mean, we see the main ones, right? We're using it for music, we're using it for reminders, but what are those third-party apps that are really sticking, that are really the use case for these speakers in the home? And I'm also curious because just recently, Alexa just launched not too long ago in Europe, and it is very new for Europe, in the UK and in Germany and in France. And so it'd be curious to see also kind of the voice apps across cultures, across countries, of what's making a difference for people.
Emily, you touched on something interesting, the concept that you noted of common ground in a conversation, and the fact that you're having to use the wake word every time. And one of the big things I do with the Echo is play Sirius XM. And every single time I have to say, Alexa, play 90s on 9 on Sirius XM. And if I say any of that wrong, or if it doesn't understand it, it just misses the whole thing. It'd be nice to say, Alexa, keep playing music, or additional context to the conversation. So I find it interesting you noted that, and I completely agree.
I just want to give you another fun example. We were heading down, I live in Seattle, down to Tacoma for the state chess tournament, and I was interacting in that case with a Google Home while I was, I think, brushing my hair, trying to think about, okay, where's the closest grocery store to where I'm going to be so I can get snacks for my kid? And I could not get it to give me the information. I would say, where's the closest grocery store to the location that I was going to be at, the Tacoma Convention Center? And it was basically picking places close to me where I am now because I said closest. And then if I said, okay, what's the address of the Tacoma Convention Center? And then in order to get it to tell me the grocery store is near there, I had to tell it back that whole address. But if it had common ground, then I could say, okay, closest grocery store to that. And it would understand what I mean. And that's the future I would like to see coming about. But those are really hard problems.
Yeah, they are. And, the flip side of it is that if Alexa just stayed on all the time, then you'd have people screaming about privacy and things like that. So, yeah, these are interesting problems that I'm glad I don't have to solve. I'm glad Amazon will handle that for us. Moving on to story number 3, and this is an interesting one. Amazon has rolled out a new tablet called the Fire HD 10 that is, according to this review that's linked in the show notes, Echo Show in tablet form. I find this very interesting because, as I've noted several times on this show and a couple of others, I am in love with the Echo Show. It's a phenomenal device. It's almost a magical device. And it's tough to even describe for folks who have not experienced it yet or haven't used it. But so anyway, this got my attention. And Jess, I want to start with you on this. Are tablets meant to be voice first? Is Amazon going to win with this like they have with the Echo Show? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I found this really interesting as well. And of our users, a lot of them do actually already use Alexa on their Fire tablets, which we found really interesting because at first we just assumed that 100% of people probably only access Alexa on an Echo device. So it's really interesting to see that tablets are coming into the fore here. And if you can give someone almost the same capabilities as an Echo Show in a much cheaper, more convenient format, then I say go for it. The one thing I think that was interesting on this, the way that this article was written, was that it kind of suggested that it was counterintuitive to have voice on a tablet, because it sort of suggests that why would you need to use voice when you can use your fingers or your hands? And I think that's one thing about the discussion around voice that I think needs to start changing, that the idea that you only use voice when you can't access your phone or your tablet. And I think it's not necessarily the case. And if anything, voice should be considered as something that is complementary to. So if you're browsing on your tablet, but you're doing one thing, but you want to also complete something else, another task at the same time, you should be able to do that with your voice. And I think that using Alexa on tablets is the way to do that. So I think it's important to start thinking about voice as not just the sort of secondary alternative to using a mobile device.
What I immediately think about with this is education. With other parts of Score Publishing, we've gotten involved in producing content in the educational realm. And Emily, I want to ask you, you teach linguistics, you teach a number of classes. Wouldn't it be cool to have a textbook, a digital textbook, or other digital resources that are part of your curriculum that are on a tablet device that could be voice first? I just think there's so much potential for that.
That's a really interesting question. I think that there's, as Jess was saying, it's worth thinking about how we use voice naturally and how it could fit in. And a lot of what we do with all kinds of devices is very much shaped by how the devices have trained us. So it's really hard to get people to do full natural language queries in internet search because we're so trained to the keyword thing. Even if we have something that's hard to express in keywords, we still try. And so figuring out where the natural uses for voice are and where it is and is not convenient, right? So one thing about your hands is that they're quiet. And so there's sometimes when you got to be quiet, and so talking wouldn't be good. And then there's sometimes where talking is the more natural alternative. And so I think that it could be, for example, if I had a textbook on a voice-activated or voice-capable system, I might want to be able to search in it, maybe search for terms I don't really know how to spell. Right? So that's one side of it, sort of finding the use cases where it makes a lot of sense. And then the other side is an issue that I think applies across voice technology, which is being ready to deal with diverse speaking styles, diverse dialects, accents. So thinking about my own students, we have quite a few international students. And I want to make sure that if I integrate something into my curriculum, it is equally accessible to someone whose English doesn't sound like mine.
I'm curious to see how what the performance is like. I mean, I think one of the things that Amazon, broke out into the market was their hardware, their mic array, the ability to talk to Alexa from across the room. Now, this is different, of course, because you have a screen, and when you have a screen, you're kind of expecting you're going to be closer. So maybe it will still pick up, hey Alexa, from a little ways away, and it'll work. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up as well with kind of voice on tablets, or it's not just voice or gesture, or touch. It's that we're really going to start seeing situations where you're going to want to use both, which is, the old MIT, put that there, and I want that one. That's where, again, kind of more on the the cameras kind of integrated into these devices are going to become kind of required. But I think using both voice and touch and gesture all together will end up making the experience much more natural. So it's not only common ground with voice, it's like common ground with context as well.
I just want to chime in and say absolutely that the common ground is not just the linguistic history of what's been going on, but the environment that the interlocutors are in and what they can see and how they can direct each other's attention to things with things like points. I think that's spot on. Moving
on to story number 4. Google is rolling out a Google Home Mini that looks similar to Amazon's Echo Dot. Apparently, it's designed to function like Amazon's Echo Dot. They're announcing this thing on October 4th, according to the report that we have linked in the news stories of the week. And Karen, I'm going to start with you on this. We've talked about Amazon. It's dominated this show. It's dominated other shows. Google, clearly with this, simply copying and pasting Amazon's approach. Is that going to be enough? Or is there something else that Google ought to be doing to compete in this space? What did you take away?
Well, I think that there's still a lot of room in this space. I mean, it's not a surprise. They want a more entry-level speaker in people's homes. So they want to compete. But I think they're also trying to get into as many homes as possible before a Facebook speaker comes or other, the Apple speaker comes. So how do they get in more people's homes, get more data, get better over time? I mean, this is what Google does really well, which is improve over time, right? It's all about the data and making it better. So I think that they're definitely not, this isn't a surprise. And I think they're doing the right things.
Jess, with what Lifebot and Okirlo are doing, does this excite you, Google coming out with their own version of the Amazon Echo Dot and so they can get more and more penetration into the marketplace? Or do you think they ought to be doing something different?
I think they should be doing this. And to be honest, I'm quite surprised it took them so long to come out with a smaller version because the Echo Dot's been around for quite a while now. So I think this is definitely something that needed to happen. I don't think it's particularly revolutionary, and I think it's just another step that they had to do, seeing as Amazon already released their own version.
I think we're also going to probably see, multi-room audio, right? So now you can have your big one in one room, and you're going to get a mini for the other room. I mean, Amazon is doing it already. One thing that Google is doing that Amazon isn't is the speaker identification. So, I mean, Google is pushing on innovation in ways that Amazon isn't, and I think they'll continue to find ways like that to push forward.
Story number 5, Roku is working on a smart speaker of its own, and this has been sort of a recurring theme on this show. Hey, here's another company doing a smart speaker. Oh, there's another one. And perhaps that's a cynical view, or maybe it's not. And Jess, I will start with you on this. What do you take away looking at this? And is this a positive, or is this just sort of irrelevant?
So I'm not too familiar with Roku. I'm not sure how big they are in the UK right now. But I do agree with you. It does seem like every week there's another brand or company announcing that they're probably going to come out with their own smart speaker. And I think it's good in the sense that it just means that more and more people will be using voice as a means of interaction and a new way of communicating with technology. But I think the real question is now, how are we going to provide a consistent experience across all these different platforms? We've already got Google Home and Alexa, but how are apps going to really provide an experience that is consistent? So, and it's not just about having the same functionality on your Google action as your Alexa skill, but say, for example, we get to the stage where people are using different voice platforms in different situations. So you might have Alexa in your home, but Cortana in your car, or Roku on your TV. How do you start an experience in one but continue it on another? And I think that's going to be the real question, because as you said with your story about the conference where someone still said that it was Google and seemed to be a bit confused about who the players are in this field, I think it's going to be really important that people are educated and they know how to use voice and how to use it across different platforms.
But Jess, are you suggesting that it should be consistent, or there's just that you can kind of take your experience on one assistant to another assistant?
I think consistency in the sense that if you say, for example, you had an iOS app, but then you switch to Android, you'd want to access the same features on Android. But I think the most important thing is this being able to carry your experience across different ones, because I do think that we'll get to a stage where people have different assistants in different parts of their life.
I know that I was pinged for that voice user interface job. So I know Roku they've been trying to hire for a long time. I was probably pinged 8 or 9 months ago. So they've had these open for a while. Maybe they're making a speaker. Definitely they're behind in adding voice as a really natural way to interact, to look, to search for your TV content for what you want to watch. But again, it goes back to, what do you do well? What are your core competencies? And why am I going to go to a Roku speaker? There has to be some reason, some benefit that it offers me over the ones that I already have, because you're right. Jess is right. I already have 2 or 3 assistants in my life. So what is Roku going to bring to me that's different?
Yeah, it's incredible audacity, isn't it? It's incredible audacity. And I've noted this is the way I think about Facebook saying that they're going to come out with a smart speaker. The incredible audacity of a Facebook or a Roku or anybody to create a device that they just assume that someone's going to put in their house and perhaps listen to every word that they ever say for the rest of their life, without a compelling use case scenario. Amazon's out there marketing every day of the week on TV. Here's what you do with this thing. But most of these other ones aren't. It's just, hey, we'll throw this out there and watch as you ring it up and take it back home and keep it in your house. I agree. It's definitely saturation.
So what I thought, and this is again building off of your story from the person who had the Google Assistant and Alexa mixed up, my advice to Roku and to Facebook and whoever else is jumping in is to think carefully about how you name the assistant. I think that Google has done well by, when you talk to the thing, you say, "Hey, Google," so you know what you're interacting with. I think Roku should do the same, both for this practical sort of brand identification, but also the context that we've been talking about, so that if there are differences before the skills become more consistent across them, it's easier for users to keep track of what they can expect from the one that they're talking to, but also for sort of important social reasons. So this put me in mind of a Medium post that I read actually as part of the seminar I taught on ethics and natural language processing. It's called Google Home versus Alexa: 2 simple user experience design gestures that delighted a female user, by Gianna Paolino from January of this year. And this is all connected with, what does it mean to assign a gender to these assistants that are not people? And what does it mean to even personify them to that extent? And so I think that Google has done a much better thing, where you are talking to Google, effectively the company or the software, where Amazon has created Alexa, given a feminine sounding name. People refer to it as she, and that leads to sort of icky interactions, as Paolino explains in this Medium post.
I would love to see that Medium post, by the way, and we will link to that in the show notes. Would love to include that. So let me follow up on that. So what is considered the best practice, or the theoretical best practice for an intelligent assistant or a voice assistant? It should be genderless, or male in some situations, female in others, or what was the takeaway?
So my takeaway, and I'm not sure this is the consensus, but my takeaway is that you're better off leaving it genderless and having it be an entity, an interlocutor, a creation, but not something that pretends to be a person. And if we get to a point where there's lots and lots of these, and then you might be able to say, okay, we're going to have some of them be male, some of them be female, some of them be other, and see that they all behave the same way, that would be positive. But right now, the trend is they are all, if gendered, they are gendered as female, and that can be quite problematic.
I know that Microsoft did a bunch of research before they really launched Cortana, and they tried to make a very neutral kind of sounding assistant. And what they found was the stronger the personality with Cortana, it was polarizing for some people, but and kind of turned some people off, but in more cases, it created more of a connection to people for reuse. So even though it wasn't neutral for everybody, so again, it did create some backlash for some people. It did create deeper connections to others. So I think that there is a very a long debate about this in the industry of having a persona, because we've been in the industry for a long time. We say, like, even if you don't design a persona, there is still one there. So you are talking to Google, the company, which is like information and like just trying to get, search-based kind of interactions, but there is a persona there.
Yeah, I think we can separate the question of personality from the question of gender. So there was a company called Oslo building a personal assistant, which I think was text-based and not voice, which has been acquired by Facebook. So that might be part of where Facebook is going. I don't have inside information beyond that. But what I know is that was not a person. So it had a personality. It was a furry creature. And
I didn't know they got bought by Facebook. I do know Oslo. Yep, he was a cute little character.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to go. It can still be a personality without, setting up a situation where you're constantly telling this, female person in your household ordering it around, or female person-like entity in your household ordering it around in front of your kids.
There was a good article in the New York Times quite a while ago about people who have become almost emotionally attached to their Alexa, and they have sort of personified it. And I think it is really important that your voice assistant has a personality, but obviously it's where do you draw the line? And I think there's a lot of debate about what the best practice is for that. And something we're doing at the moment, which is we're finding quite interesting, is we're building our skill for Google. So we're building Google Action, and for Google, you can actually change the voice that speaks. And there's 2 female options and 2 male options. We're still discussing this because we want our app to have its own personality as a sort of sub-assistant under Google, but we want to make sure that we get it right and that the personality we portray kind of matches the voice options that are available to us. So we'll see how that goes.
This is an interesting conversation. This is a fascinating conversation. And from my standpoint, with Alexa, I interact with Alexa every day. I don't think about that it's a female. I don't know. I'm sure I'm probably in the minority. I'm sure that probably makes a big impact. But what I will say is, when I was at the Intelligent Assistance Conference just a few days ago, I had a chance to meet Brian Romley in person. He's been a frequent guest on our show, just a brilliant individual. And he was talking, he does a lot of work creating his own voice-first prototypes and doing independent research. And one thing I know that he's been working on is what it looks like to integrate Myers-Briggs into the development of an intelligent assistant or a voice assistant. To me, I think that's absolutely paramount, because the gender can be one thing. I'll talk all day to a genderless voice assistant or a male or a female, but if that thing is chirping at me in a way that like it becomes grating, that's going to be a problem. Moving on to story number 6, there was a recent NPR interview. It's a brief one, wasn't very long, and it sort of retreads some old ground in terms of Amazon and Alexa's development. But one thing that really caught my attention, and I thought it was pretty negative, is the assertion that I think is correct, that creating an Alexa skill, for the most part, is doing work for Amazon for free. So right now, just to recap, you develop an Alexa skill. Amazon's been great. They've developed the market. They've been out in front marketing. They've really provided a lot of leadership in the marketplace. But what they haven't done is allow people to use the developer tools that they've provided to create voice applications that you can sell. Instead, they tell you, the developer, that if you do well enough, and we're not even going to tell you what that means, if you have a certain amount of engagement, we will send you a check. If you do not have a certain amount of engagement, we will not send you a check. And I think it's totally unsatisfactory. I've talked about this several times on the podcast before. I think it's one of the few negative things that Amazon has not addressed yet. And I just want to get all three of y'all, and Emily, I'm going to start with you on this. First of all, do you agree with me? Do you think this is a bad thing? Second of all, what other takeaways, if any, did you have from this piece?
So yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I'm very much worried about tech companies exploiting, especially students who are studying computer science and related fields, and saying, yeah, come to our hackathon and come, and basically getting them to work for them for free. And I think it's an important role that we play as faculty in educating students in the value that their skills hold, and to really say to them, think carefully about this. Or what are you getting for your effort? And is there another way for you to get that? Similarly, I will sometimes be approached by employers who want to see if any of our students are available for unpaid internships. And my answer is always, well, you're welcome to advertise that, but since they tend to get paid internships, probably no one's going to take you up on it.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. There's so much discussion today about just manipulation of people and manipulation of labor and stuff like that. It just makes it an even harder pill to swallow. And so I think those examples were great, Emily. Jess and Karen, your thoughts on this, either one of y'all?
Yeah, so I think we spoke about this last time I was on the show, because they just announced that they'd start rewarding more categories apart from games, I think. And I don't think anything's changed since then. And so now they're rewarding people who build apps and productivity, and that includes Lifebot. But completely, as you say, we have no idea how they decide what makes this good, popular app. No idea how they decide how much you would receive, and the money can change every month. And I think, especially as a startup, it's quite frustrating to have to sort of wait on Amazon to understand how we can start to really monetize. And there seems to be no real indication of what they're doing and what their plans are on that front. And I think especially, I know a lot of young developers as well who are encouraged by the idea of potentially getting some money to just churn out skill after skill. And in that sense, the article, even though it's very negative, it is right. A lot of the skills that are now on the store are of questionable quality in terms of whether it's something that people actually want to use more than once and as more than just a gimmick. And I think as soon as there's a proper way to monetize, then it will encourage people to also develop skills that have more meaning, that have a better experience for users. And that's definitely something we're trying to, aside from the monetization issue, it's definitely something we're trying to really work on, is to actually build a skill that people value and that people want to use. So we're talking to our users every day. We're really trying to understand what makes a quality voice app. And I think that is the other side of what this article was saying, that the unfortunate side of this is that it looks like quantity is being favored by Amazon over quality right now.
I love that idea, Jess. I hadn't really thought about it that way of, first, build, if we had a good way, if they had a good way to monetize, then we would be building better. We would be building better apps. So maybe it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing, but clearly now, I mean, there's too many, and they're pretty bad, or they don't work. I mean, I thought I found, I had a use case, and we really tried to use it. It was a translator. It was a French translator. So it would give it an English word, and it would tell us what the French word was. And probably one out of every 4 times we used it, I would open I can't remember what it was called, the French translator, it was down, 1 out of every 4 times we use it. So it was forget it. I'm not going to, to be disappointed 25% of the time because I can't access it. It's not worth it. If you don't care about, you're trying to provide me a skill, you're trying to provide an experience, but you don't care about keeping it alive, then it's not worth it. So I love that idea. Let's make sure that they monetize properly, and we'll get better quality out of it.
And I think adding on to that, Amazon also have a responsibility to educate developers on what to do after they've published their app. I think they've got this massive push right now to just get people to get skills out there, no matter whether they even work properly, as you said. And we've encountered so many skills that you can't even get onto, that don't work as they say they would. And I think one thing that many skills aren't doing is actually upkeeping their app or updating it or fixing bugs that people are noticing. So I think it's one thing to help obviously Amazon want a skill store with a lot of skills, so it looks attractive for people to use. But I think they really need to start also providing more education for developers on what to do after it's been published.
Completely agree across the board. And I think, to the extent that the Apple App Store is a appropriate comparison for this, which I think it's a pretty good comparison for this, at least at first, for what's going on and what Amazon ought to be trying to do. When a app developer spends a lot of time, I know this, my brother is an app developer, he's based in Atlanta. When you spend a lot of time developing an application, you pour your heart into it, you pour your soul into it, and the intention is that you're going to sell that. You have the ability to sell that. You're going to sell that, and you're going to put food on your table with it. What happens? Well, I can tell you what happens. When people respond to you positively or negatively, you are extraordinarily responsive. When somebody presents you with a problem, you fix it immediately. When there's any when an opportunity for customer service arises, you provide it. It lifts the whole ecosystem up just with the sheer fact that you could sell your product. And in a situation where you can't, this weird thing that Amazon's got going, which only has one other comparable, and it's Amazon's other ecosystem, which is in the publishing realm and what they do with Kindle. This is an exact mirror of what they do over there. It just muddies the water. It leads to situations like VoiceSpot.ai reported on last week, which is that 62% of Alexa skills today do not have any user reviews. None. So I think an appropriate takeaway from that is, people are just downloading stuff as a gimmick or not at all, and then if it works, chances are it doesn't work, or there's always going to be feedback to provide, but there's no impetus on the user to provide that. Who cares? It's just all throwaway stuff. So hopefully Amazon sees the light on this and allows people to monetize. And that I'm hearing consensus from the panel on this. Any closing thoughts on this news story?
I absolutely agree. And I think it ties back to that growth from 3% to 6% of people using it in the second week. I think that if we did have this scenario that Jess and Karen are talking about, where the app developers were more directly connected to their customers and actually seeing gains for doing better apps, those numbers would go way up as well.
Sure. And we didn't even discuss, all this story is about, or all we've talked about, is the ability to monetize the initial sale of an app. We aren't even touching on in-app purchasing or other monetization schemes that can build off of that. So anyway, I think the point is made. Hopefully Amazon is listening, if not to this podcast, then to their other customers, who I'm sure will be providing the same feedback, and maybe we get this at some point. This was fantastic. Emily, Karen, Jess, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us on. This was a lot of fun.
Thank all three of you for sharing your time, sharing your experience, your expertise, and your insight with not just me, but the audience. It is greatly appreciated. For This Week in Voice, Thursday, September 21st, 2017, thank you for listening, and until next time.